Thanks for joining us inside the Dancer's Studio, where we bring listeners like you closer to the creative process. Inside the Dancer's Studio is a program of the National Center for Choreography in Akron, Ohio, as part of our Ideas in Motion initiative. This episode was recorded as an ongoing documentation practice with NCCAkron visiting artists in 2023 to 2024. Today we join Christy Bolingbroke, our Executive Artistic Director, in conversation with Tucson, Arizona-based flamenco movement artist Angelina Ramirez. Ramirez explores what it means to be a queer Latinx flamenca, practicing in a traditional Roma Gitano form of dance. As a teaching artist, she is interested in the intersections of art and healing, focusing on work with elders of all abilities and integrated flamenco for neurodivergent participants. She has toured the world with renowned companies like Noche Flamenca and continues to produce events and festivals throughout Arizona.
So I'd love to start with, when did you decide to become a choreographer? Or was there a defining moment where you felt, I am a dance maker?
Well, what's special about flamenco is that flamenco is done within a conversation and a structure. A lot of how we describe it so people can understand is a lot like jazz. There's a lot of communication happening live in order for us as a mover to do what we would like to do. But we're not doing it alone. We're working with the guitarist, we're working with the singer and stuff like that. So all of that, like your movement ideas and movement structure comes from this conversations that's happening live with other artists. Now, outside of that, then you can get into conceptual ideas and choreography. I felt like I didn't give myself permission to be my own choreographer until about 2018.
Wow.
Like deep into it.
Yeah.
Where I had, actually was like, wait a second, I can make flamenco my own. I'm not just,
in service to so many others.
To this, and in service to the art form, and in service to so many others, students, yada, yada. I was like, wait a second, I can do this for myself. And I can also tell my own story using flamenco, this practice that I have been dedicated to and just enthralled with for so many years to really now start to tell my own stories and really experiment with my own movement, So it's been so interesting. I guess to answer your question after all of this, right? Is it's still evolving how I am as a choreographer, how I work in this field as a choreographer, and getting to work with other choreographers, especially movers outside of flamenco in other genres, and learning their practices and then kind of bringing them into what I do is also very cool and very interesting, and really making me grow. Yeah, as a choreographer. So
I jumped right into the whole journey. I love it. And because you brought up the conversation with music as well, and in anticipation for this, because I think you might be one of the first percussive dance artists that we have got the opportunity to speak with on this podcast. And so I'm really curious, because the choreography and the movement also is musical. And so is there something that comes first? The sounds, the music that you are making your contribution to the conversation? Or is it the movement and then the music and your role as a musician that comes on as a secondary layer? Or is there even an always one comes first over the other? Is this the chicken and egg of flamenco? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, That's a good question. I think it all is very depending. I think I guess I'll speak for myself. I will
make it your own.
Yeah, I'm going to make it my own. I think that you will choose what specific rhythm that you want to work a storyline in. Yes, flamenco has the musicality is really quite complex and really quite beautiful and really it takes a lot of time. When I'm bringing people into flamenco, I tell them you're not just learning movement, you're also becoming a musician because it's also very important to understand what's going on in the music. You got to study. I'm not a flamenco singer. I'm not a flamenco guitarist, but I need to kind of understand and know what calls are, what breaks are, what interludes are, and what the purpose that they serve within their own way of performing a piece. So for me, it's okay, well, I would like to work a piece in the palo meaning the rhythm or the music or the song, in alegrías, which is, a music and song from comes from Cádiz, Spain. And alegrías meaning happiness, right? Is something that's more uplifting. There are many different types of songs, letras we call them, that they can sing, but in this type of time signature and in this type of mood, which is up, happy, whatever. So I'm going to do alegrías, but I'm going to tell my story and I'm going to make a certain types of choreography or make some certain type of movement to this. So I need to know kind of what my base is, what rhythm I'm going to use, and then I think then I will, I know that I want to make something with this music. And so then it's kind of there is a structure. Yes. And I'm making a square with my, because it could be very structural, but I feel what I was talking about before about giving myself permission to start playing with that structure and breaking some rules. And then I could start really experimenting with it, and working with. So another thing is I typically don't work with recorded music. I always work with live musicians.
I was going to ask, what do you look for? I mean, you talk about understanding some of the aspects of the music from such an empathetic place, just as sort of your own baseline understanding and self-awareness. What do you look for then in a musician or a musical collaborator?
I'm very fortunate to know some amazing flamenco artists, both from Spain, but also here. Well, I'm from the Southwest, and I work with mostly musicians that are kind of in my vicinity, Arizona, New Mexico, California. And however, there are musicians, artists, flamenco artists in general that actually prefer to just stick to what we call puro flamenco, purísimo flamenco,
pure flamenco.
The pure. This is in all of that. And there are some musicians that are willing to kind of go into this experimental route. So I think knowing who those are, I use both of them. Even challenge the ones who are no, I'm a puro artist, and I'm well, challenge them and work with each other. And I've been just really fortunate that the people that I work with, that I call my flamenco family, my dearest friends, have really been supportive in my journey into kind of playing, experimenting, playing in flamenco, kind of, coming out of this structure and this the puro of it all and just trying out new things. So
do you also find you look for traditionally trained flamenco dancers, or have you been exploring with differently trained dancers?
I both. Yeah. That's the cool part is that, I always go back to, I guess, traditionally how flamenco is presented. I do that once a month in Tucson, Arizona. We have what we call a tablao, which are like small cabaret type shows, small space, live musicians, and we go in and we do like our solos, and we support each other in, if there's a guitar solo, if there's a cante solo, a singing solo, and a dance solo, a baile solo. We kind of all do our pieces, and then that's the show, more like conceptual productions. I've worked, actually, yes, mostly with flamenco artists or flamenco trained artists. I'm very fortunate in this since the beginning of this year and a little bit into last year, been learning a lot from other movement artists and their approaches to practice, and like I've mentioned before, and really adapting some of that into flamenco. And I feel like that it's changing a little bit how information comes out of my insides into my body, which is actually quite exciting and
so much
different.
Perspective.
Oh yeah, much perspective, and I am working with a dear friend of mine, and we're working on some weird stuff. And I'm like, hey, I figured out, I've learned this tool. Like, can we try it together? And how uncomfortable we both are, But seeing his uncomfortable, just like this other way of being vulnerable to what we're trying to say, and it takes a lot, because we've been like flamenco a lot of times it's just so in the studio and learning the structure, and and then it's kind of up to you to like take it where you want to.
Well, it seems like hearing you is reminding me, I think that there is a implicit assumption maybe with classically rooted art forms that you practice and you get really good at it, but it's not about perfection, perhaps. I love hearing you describe, like, we're doing weird stuff and agreeing to be uncomfortable. So I want to invite you to articulate, like, what is your definition of virtuosity in dance then? If it isn't about the person with the fastest footwork or the most musicality, but kind of as you've been on this journey, what's virtuosity to you right now?
Right now, it's recognizing, being patient with, and working with my aging body. Flamenco is demanding to your body, and as we all know, as all movers know, like as we age, our movement changes, and our maybe our abilities might change, and we maybe can't do things like how we used to when we were 13 years old, and
there's a lot of things I can't do that I used to do at 13 years old.
Yeah. And I think, what virtuosity is like leaning into that and being okay with like making that as an evolvement and not as like, well, I used to be able to do 4 turns, and it's like, loss. It's not a loss, it's in flamenco. It's what you're giving. It's kind of like what you're giving to the people, your audience. or whoever you're trying to like do this for.
Something different to give at this age.
Oh, yeah.
Than in teenage years.
Yeah.
How you talked a little bit about you've been learning so much from other movement artists. You also have been doing some work as a teaching artist around creative aging. What have you been learning there? What has that looked like, and how is it speaking to this latest definition of virtuosity?
What is important for me is making flamenco accessible to all, for all abilities, for all bodies, for all, it is, and it's so good for us. I mean, movement is good for everyone, but flamenco can give a little bit of extra because again, we're working with rhythm, we're working with movement, we're working with communication, we're working with song, we're working, music, and everything is not just for, the music is not just for the guitarist, and the song is not just for the singer. The movement's not just for the dancer. So flamenco brings, because of that, this sense of community. It brings this sense of, sharing space. And so working with older adults, flamenco in general, I mean, like I said, takes a lot of what's inside. And as we age, we have more story, more experience, more things to share and more things to tell. So it's not about the ability to do fast footwork. It's showing that, moving your hand can mean so many different things. And what do you want it to mean? And once you give that prompt, what do you want this to mean? Then that moving the hand in a circle way becomes personalized to that person, and they have just made a movement their own, kind of using a flamenco movement technique, So, and then just kind of approaching it that way with them, okay, this is what this is. So I'm working with hands right now. So this is our floreo. So if your hands feel good, tell me, I'm going to teach you how we do a floreo. Now, think about what you want that floreo to mean. And they get to kind of personalize. It doesn't look like mine, but we're doing the same thing. So it's just very personalized and allowing them to just kind of take ownership of their movement as I'm just kind of showing them a base of what a flamenco hand gesture is, or a stomp.
As I'm watching you move your hands, and sort of, if to describe for some of our listeners who don't get to see, the fingers, almost blooming outward as flowers and bringing in. But it's also, I'm reflecting on what you said about virtuosity being sort of meeting your body where you are in terms of aging, and maybe reflecting on what you used to do at 13 and letting go of that to meet yourself where you are right now. It sounds like a lot of the work with creative aging is not about reminding people who they were at 13, because this might be their first introduction to flamenco. But it is about embracing the sort of beginner mindset to approach, and flamenco as an outlet for expression.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that excites them so much. And then it's something fun.
All the senses.
All the senses.
The listening, the body, the tactileness.
Yeah, I think, when they are being introduced to, we're going to have a flamenco class, there's all, it's like, what? You think we're going to be able to do that? And I've worked with this now for a few years, and I feel like I have a really good approach for anybody, no matter how old, but particularly for older adults, like this doesn't have to be as intimidating as you think. Okay. Let's sit down and talk about it first. And before you know it, before they know it, we're sitting and we're doing some movement, and before they know it, we might be, trying it standing up, or stay seated, or, it's however you want to like come into this space. We're going to work with it.
So much choice making with how you want to show up in the space.
Yeah.
And it's not just about making those shapes in spaces as well. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice. And it's such a good way to like also connect with someone, a participant, and get to know them. And also like work with them. We're like flamenco. We're communicating. I might be coming in as the teaching artist, but then all of a sudden I feel like there's a time where we're kind of sharing those roles.
Yeah, like in any communication or conversation, when someone's talking at you.
Yes.
Yes. And then also when they're looking for their moment to also contribute something.
Yes.
And that give and take. One more question. I'm curious what sort of advice you have received either from your teachers over time that continues to reassure or propel you forward, or if you have a favorite piece of advice that you wouldn't mind offering on to any of our listeners or students who are considering a creative life.
Someone who knew me since I was a kid, taking class in Tucson, and I don't think she realized that she was giving me a piece of advice that has stuck with me throughout all this time, all these years, is that I had left to go train in New Mexico, flamenco, and then I came back for a short time, and I was teaching class, and she came in, and we were, I've known her for many years. She's older than I, and she's like, so Angelina, what are you going to do? What do you plan on doing now that you're back? And I said, I just don't know. And then she said, I didn't know what I was going to do until I was 30. And I said, okay. She goes, but, give yourself some time and be patient with yourself. Don't feel like you need to rush into anything. And it, don't feel like you need to rush into anything. I constantly, I do, I think we all can be very hard on ourselves, or we feel a sense of urgency, and especially when you're getting older, you're like, I haven't done that yet, know, and it's like, I bring it back and I say, okay, you don't have to be in such a hurry. Like it's going to happen. I feel like what is mid-career these days, and people throw that term at me all the time. And I'm just like, okay, I might be doing flamenco now for 30 plus years, and I might be in middle-aged, but there's still a lot of things that I'm learning, and there's still a lot of things that I want to do, and so I'm still emerging, although I've been doing this practice for a long time, like I'm still an emerging artist. Yeah. And I have to, I remind myself that whenever I feel like I'm running out of time,
It's that beginner mindset again. It's that openness as a place of staying grounded instead of getting swept along.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's what keeps me, it's just what keeps me thriving. I'm doing cool things right now. Yeah. Things that I weren't really that planned as I was like, okay, what do I want to do as a professional dancer? And I never really felt the need to ever answer that question. I just kind of took it like in the steps that it came, you know, and then sometimes those one experience can be done and over and just leaves you room to try something else. And so, yeah, I'm really happy right now with what I'm doing. I don't think that these weren't like long-term goals, but maybe they were like inside and I didn't realize it and put it outward.
Without being a box.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, I'd say just take some time, you know, and don't feel rushed and urgent, because maybe some of that work, whether creative or professional goals, might not turn out like the way you really that you deserve, you know. And sometimes like give it some space and some air, like will probably settle in a way that you can handle and that you deserve.
Support for Inside the Dancers Studio Conversation Series is supported by NCCAkron, the University of Akron, the University of Akron Foundation, the Mary Schiller Myers Lecture Series in the Arts, and Audioteca, a global audio manufacturer with U.S. headquarters in Northeast Ohio. Our podcast program is produced by Jennifer Edwards. James Sleeman is our editor. Transcription by Arushi Singh. Theme music by Flaco Torres. Cover art by Micah Krause. Special thanks to Laura Alicott, Sarah Durham, and Will Blake. To learn more about NCCAkron, please visit us online at nccakron.org and follow us on Instagram or Facebook at NCCAkron. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we encourage you to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform by searching for Inside the Dancers Studio. Thanks for listening, and stay curious.